As world leaders at the G20 turn their attention to the issue of climate change today, the host of the UN's COP29 summit has urged the world's biggest economies to send a clear signal of their, quote, commitment to addressing the climate crisis. Now, the comments come as delegates from nearly 200 countries at the summit negotiate on funding to combat climate change. That's the big deal. But the UN's annual meeting has faced criticism, with former leaders and climate experts issuing a letter calling the summit, quote, no longer fit for purpose. Recently, I spoke with U.S. Energy Secretary Jennifer Granholm about the goals of this year's summit. And we should note we spoke before President-elect Trump announced his pick to run the Energy Department. I first want to get your reaction to this letter and these climate activists saying that this event, this gathering, is just no longer fit for its purpose.
Well, I certainly appreciate the sentiment behind it, which is that we are fast approaching 1.5 degrees, that we're supposed to limit our increases in temperature, and they are frustrated by that, as are everybody. I think everybody here feels like we've got to put our foot on the accelerator and move more quickly to contain the rise in temperatures.
And so despite that agreement internationally, things are changing in the present. I know I was at an international conference recently. The number one question I received was, how will U.S. policy change under an incoming Trump administration and Republican Congress? I'm curious how you're responding to those questions.
Here's what I would say is that no matter who is in the White House, this transition to clean energy is moving forward. The people at the state and the subnational levels in the United States are all moving forward. The private sector is moving forward with its efforts to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. So this is happening regardless of who occupies the White House. And I will say that President Biden's laws that he signed, the Inflation Reduction Act and the bipartisan infrastructure law, have created massive investment across the country. They have worked. In other words, to date, as of now, 900 new factories are opening to build the clean energy products that will reduce greenhouse gas emissions, whether it's solar panels or electric vehicles or the batteries for electric vehicles or wind turbines. Those products are all being made in the United States now. Do we want to stop that in communities all across the country? 80% of those investments, $500 billion worth, are going to red states and red counties. 400,000 people being employed. 57% of the people who are being employed are in red states and red counties. I think that because of the embedded nature of the movement of these laws, meaning the embedded factories that have been announced, it would be very difficult and not wise at all to undo this industrial strategy that's been working.
And if I'm listening to the subtext of what you've just laid out, perhaps people in the U.S., in red states, as you described them, maybe we'll see the benefits of these policies in the years to come. And I'm curious, I know you're there advocating on behalf of the U.S., but if there is a change in leadership and momentum as far as U.S. policy toward this issue, what nations, in your view, are taking the type of approach that you would like to see the U.S. emulate and reflect?
Well, I think the U.S. really has been a leader, and my guess is that I know for a fact that other countries have been emulating the United States. But if we pull back,
I knew you were going to say that.
Who's going to fill that gap? Right? I mean, who's going to fill that gap? It's going to be the country, our biggest economic competitor, which is China. They are hoping that the Trump administration pulls back on all of the laws that incentivize investment in the United States. They would be the beneficiaries. So we need to make sure that these laws continue. Other countries, as I say, are copying us. When we pass these laws, my counterparts, the energy ministers across the world, were very envious, and a number of the countries, including the EU, have been copying. Canada have been copying what the United States has done, and that's terrific. There's plenty of work to go around, but it would be extremely foolish, counterproductive, and would make America weaker, frankly, by ceding all of this manufacturing opportunity to China.
And in our last moment, I'm just curious, based on your time there and your conversations, if there's anything that's surprised you, anything unexpected that will be a part of your memory of this year's gathering.
Well, I will say this, that the ministers all are determined to fill in the leadership gap that will be present if President Biden pulls out of the Paris Agreement. He did it before, and the effort to move toward clean energy continued. The effort to reduce greenhouse gas emissions continued. These ministers are determined that we will continue to move forward, that this movement is inexorable.
That was Energy Secretary Jennifer Granholm speaking to me just a few days ago. And after we taped that interview, she and her team pointed out that she misspoke in her final answer there when she referred to President Biden pulling out of the Paris Climate Agreement. She had, in fact, meant to say President-elect Trump.